Hello Army, welcome back to Seoul Spotlight Channel. The night the live broadcast went live, the city didn't know it was about to hold its breath. Windows glowed in quiet rooms, screens lighting up faces that had grown used to waiting for small moments of connection. When Jungkook appeared on screen, it felt ordinary at first, like any other late-night check-in from someone the world had learned to love from afar. The stream began without spectacle. No dramatic lighting, no carefully scripted words. Just a familiar face framed by the soft hum of a room that had learned to host both music and silence. His voice carried the easy warmth fans recognized, the kind that made the distance between him and millions of viewers feel thinner than it was. It felt like a conversation that might drift anywhere. At first, the comments scrolled in their usual rhythm, hearts and greetings floating upward like small lanterns. Then the tone shifted. Jungkook's words slowed, and with that slowing came honesty that didn't dress itself for the camera. He spoke about habits that idols are rarely expected to admit out loud. Smoking, he said simply, without excuse or performance. The chat stuttered, then surged, the digital equivalent of a collective inhale. The confession did not land as scandal so much as surprise. Fans had grown used to curated versions of their idols, polished into something aspirational and distant. This admission sounded human in a way that unsettled the image they had learned to hold. Some viewers flinched. Others leaned closer to their screens, as if honesty had made the distance feel suddenly smaller. Then he said something even quieter but somehow louder. He admitted that he didn't always listen to music. The words drifted into the stream like a stone dropped into still water. For someone known to live and breathe performance, this felt almost heretical. Yet there was no irony in his voice. It was a simple truth about being tired, about how even the things you love can become heavy when they're also your work. The chat exploded into questions and jokes, disbelief tangled with empathy. People tried to read between the lines, to find the meaning behind the meaning. Some felt relieved to hear that even someone so gifted could feel distant from the craft that defined him. Others worried about what it suggested, about burnout whispered through a smile. He went on, and the room seemed to lean in with him. He talked about pressure, about the careful ways he learned to shape himself for the world. The way personal expression sometimes feels like a risk when so many eyes are trained on every movement. He didn't accuse. He didn't dramatize. He spoke in the tone of someone naming the weather inside his own chest. For fans, this was unfamiliar terrain. Idols are trained to present strength, gratitude, and optimism. Vulnerability usually arrives polished, packaged into lyrics or interviews approved by many layers of protection. This vulnerability felt unfiltered. It arrived without a safety net, and that made it feel both brave and fragile. Screenshots traveled faster than the live itself. Short clips were clipped into shorter clips, words lifted from their context and set loose on timelines that thrive on reaction. The confession went viral not because it was shocking in content, but because it was shocking in tone. It sounded like a person speaking, not a persona performing. Some fans defended him with fierce tenderness, reminding others that honesty is not a scandal. That being human does not disqualify you from being admired. They wrote long posts about the weight of expectation, about how the industry shapes people into symbols before it lets them be individuals. These posts didn't trend as fast as the clips, but they found homes in quieter corners of the fandom. Others worried aloud. They wondered if his words would bring backlash, if the openness he offered would be met with the familiar tightening of rules. The industry has long taught artists that transparency is dangerous, that the smallest deviation from perfection can be magnified into controversy. The fear was not about what he had said, but about how the world might answer him. Somewhere between the defense and the worry, a deeper conversation took shape. People began to talk about the invisible limits placed on major artists, about the cost of being managed, about how creative freedom can shrink when your image becomes a product shared by many hands. Jungkook's words became a doorway into a discussion that had always existed but rarely found a moment this clear to step through. When the live ended, the silence it left behind felt louder than the noise that had filled it. Fans sat with their phones in their hands, refreshing feeds, reading reactions, feeling the strange aftertaste of having seen something too real for a space designed to turn everything into content. The intimacy of the moment didn't vanish when the stream did. It lingered, asking to be understood rather than consumed. Jungkook put his phone down and let the room return to itself. The quiet that followed was not regretful. It was reflective. He had spoken without armor, and the world had heard him through layers of glass and signal. He knew the risk of that choice. He also knew the relief of not carrying everything alone for one night. The next morning, headlines softened his words into shapes that fit neatly into columns. Confession became controversy. Honesty became headline. The nuance of tone was replaced by the sharp edge of click-worthy phrases. It wasn't malicious so much as mechanical, the way machines turn complexity into something easier to carry. Fans argued in comment sections about what idols owe their audiences. Some said transparency was a gift. Others said it was unfair to expect people to bleed in public. The debate looped, familiar and unresolved, circling the same questions about privacy, authenticity, and the cost of being seen. In quieter spaces, something gentler happened. People wrote about their own burnout, about loving something until it became heavy, about needing distance from passion to find it again. Jungkook's words, stripped of spectacle, had touched a shared nerve. The story was no longer just about an idol's confession. It was about permission to be tired, to be imperfect, to be honest about the weight of expectation. Days later, the viral heat cooled, as it always does. New stories climbed the feed. The internet moved on to its next moment of collective attention. But the echo of that live remained in small ways. In how fans spoke to each other with a little more patience. In how they defended the idea that idols are not endless sources of inspiration, but people with finite energy. Jungkook returned to his routines, to rehearsals and recordings that ask for presence even when presence feels expensive. The confession did not change the machinery around him overnight. But it changed the texture of how some people listened. They heard the pauses in his voice with new awareness. They noticed the effort behind the smile with new respect. There is a strange power in speaking plainly in a world that profits from polish. It does not dismantle systems. It does not erase pressure. But it creates a crack in the surface where something human can breathe. Jungkook's live did not offer solutions. It offered a moment of truth, and sometimes that is enough to start a different kind of conversation. As the memory of the broadcast settled into the archive of fandom lore, it took on a quieter shape. Not a scandal, but a reminder that even in industries built on perfection, imperfection still finds a way to speak. That honesty can travel through glass and wire and reach people who needed to hear that they were not alone in feeling the weight of being expected to shine all the time. The city returned to its usual rhythm. Screens dimmed. Rooms went dark. But in the spaces where fans lay awake with their thoughts, something had shifted slightly. A reminder that behind the performances and the polish, there are people learning how to carry their lives in public. And sometimes, in the soft glow of a late-night live, they let that weight be seen for just long enough to matter.